right. Next on our agenda is our featured speaker today. And it's my pleasure to introduce our featured speaker, Terry Tamminen. He's an author, lecturer, and strategist on energy and the environment. He's been working for environmental causes for years and is an expert on marine conservation, climate change, renewable energy, waste to energy, and solutions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and become a more energy efficient society. He currently serves as president and CEO of AltaSea, a groundbreaking nonprofit blue economy hub based right next to us here at the Port of Los Angeles. In 2003, he served as secretary of the California Environmental Protection Agency. Even though he was a Democrat, he was appointed by a Republican governor. And in December of 2004, he later served as cabinet secretary and the chief policy advisor to the governor of the state of California. The blue economy represents the next frontier of sustainable economic development, and climate change is not a hoax. It is a real threat to our planet. Terry was ranked #1 by The Guardian on its global list of the top 50 people who can save planet Earth. So it's my pleasure to introduce Terry Tamminen. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for that kind introduction. First of all, I want to thank all of you for taking a Sunday afternoon to do what you're doing. This is so incredibly important. And I do want to also introduce my wife, Leslie Tamminen, in the back there. She works with NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab, which, because she's in their Earth Sciences Directorate, and this administration doesn't want to know what's going on its own planet, even for farmers and other typically, Republican or conservative interests. Their budgets are being slashed. The science, as you know, is under attack, and she's at ground zero for that. So if you want to learn more, talk to her. She's also a former legislative advocate for Heal the Bay, and so knows a lot about local issues as well. So she's the brains. I'm the beauty. I also have to just, before I get into talking about something that I hope is positive, the blue economy and what's going on in that regard to tackle climate change, I do have to mention this one anecdote, because you mentioned earlier about what's going on with ice and the ice raids, and we see this all on the news. We see the horrific scenes from Minneapolis and various other places every day, and how it just seems to be getting worse and worse. Well, the Friday before Christmas, we had a group of landscapers working on our new home in San Pedro. We're on Anchovy. We just moved here. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, 2 ICE agents showed up and whisked 2 of the workers off the street with no due process, wouldn't let them call their families. We have no idea if they were documented or not. Before we could get out there to intervene, they were gone. That's the approach that they take. So if you think this is something that only happens on the news, and that afternoon when that happened, I called Tim McOsker, and he said, unfortunately, that day, ICE was sweeping throughout San Pedro, but they weren't going up and down every single neighborhood street. So how did they know? Unfortunately, we have neighbors who obviously don't share our values, and certainly don't share the respect for the dignity of other human beings. So I just tell you this, not only as just kind of a personal story, but to let you know this can happen literally on your block, on your lawn. So with that, and not that you needed any more motivation, I've got some slides to show you, but before I do, I just want to tell you about, I was surfing the web recently, and I came across an Australian tourist website. They give advice and answer questions about coming to Australia as a tourist. And many of the questions were, let's just say, ill-informed at best, and so they could only answer humorously. And the one that I found the most enlightening and funny was somebody from the United States asked, what direction is north in Australia? And the website responded, when you get here, face south and turn 180 degrees, and then we'll send you the rest of the directions. Now, I tell you this because while it is funny, it highlights what I wanted to talk about today, which is that many people on both sides of the aisle do not understand the planet that we're living in today. And I'd say every one of you probably understands the threat from climate change and other sustainability challenges, the threat to science and so forth that we're living through today. But we all need to better understand this planet so that we can plan for the future and do a better job of creating a sustainable future. And nowhere is that more evident than in our ocean. Most people don't realize 70% of the planet is ocean, not land. And that doesn't even tell the whole story, because if you look at the 30% of the planet that's land, you look at the map, that's kind of what animals and plants and humans have to use in some way and to inhabit. But that 70% that's water is not just the surface, it's deep, and the habitat goes deep as well as wide. So I asked researchers at UCLA to tell me if we took all of that water and put it on the 30% of the planet that's land, how deep would the swimming pool be? And the answer was 5 miles deep across all of the part of the planet that's got dirt on it, as high as Mount Everest. And so that gives you a real perspective of how much more ocean there is than land. And yet, here we are as humans, we've been powerful enough and dumb enough to change the chemistry, the pH of the ocean. We've turned it more acidic. There's all kinds of consequences to that. We've also strip mined the ocean of fish and other kinds of wildlife to the point that almost every commercial fishery has crashed. And the list goes on and on. We've used it as a dumping ground for plastic and so on. But I'm here not to tell you what you probably already know, but rather to show you about AltaSea and what we think is the bright future of the blue economy. So can we pull up that first slide, please? There we go. So this is AltaSea in the Port of Los Angeles. And where you see the AltaSea sign there, and then that long building going north to south, that is 180,000 square feet of historic warehouses that were built 110 years ago to take cargo from what at the time was the brand new Panama Canal. And all of the West Coast ports were competing. Oh, let's go back to that first slide if you don't mind. Or back to the first one. There you go. So all of the ports on the West Coast were competing to get that business. And so these warehouses were built, and then the Navy used them in World War I and World War II as a submarine base in World War I, and in World War II to aggregate soldiers and material to send to the Pacific Theater of War, including my dad, who trained at Pendleton as a Marine and came up here and came through these buildings to get on a ship. And in fact, there's a Liberty ship right across the water from us, as you can see there, that's a tourist attraction, the Lane Victory. You can actually go on that ship. And so in any event, this whole peninsula 10 years ago was dedicated to our nonprofit, AltaSea. It was created to take over these dilapidated old warehouses. And I say the port gave this to us because, yeah, they don't charge us rent, but we had to raise the $50 million to renovate these dilapidated old warehouses into this modern blue economy hub. And then across the street there on the right side of that peninsula, you'll see some vacant land. Used to have oil tank farms on it. That's been taken out, and the port has got to clean up the soil and turn that over to us for future development. And now we can go to the second slide. There we go. So this is just a little bit about me. You've heard a little bit about my introduction. I've written books. I've worked for Governor Schwarzenegger, as you heard, a Democrat who was actually the first appointee by Republican Schwarzenegger. He was trying to send a message, and you might not agree with everything he did. I certainly don't, but obviously he did have a bipartisan administration. And as you know, most of his big accomplishments were on the environment. So I was honored to be able to write the Million Solar Roofs Initiative, the Hydrogen Highway Initiative, our Global Warming Solutions Act, get our renewable portfolio standard for renewable energy up to 75%, et cetera. And obviously I've also worked with people like Leonardo DiCaprio, John Kerry, the late, great Jane Goodall, a lot of people who share your values and understand what's at risk in this planet. Let's go to the next slide. I could do like those old FedEx commercials where you just do the shadow puppet now. But in any event, let me just talk about AltaSea while we're getting up that next slide. So as I mentioned, it was formed 10 years ago as a nonprofit to take over this facility. And now we are a home for education, for workforce training, and for research and development of the blue economy. And so, and there's a little bit more about our mission and our purpose, and you can see a few more aerial shots there. Let's just go right ahead to the next slide. And then there's some statistics which we can make available to you. We can send this whole PowerPoint to you if you really want it, but let's go ahead. So what do? We start with education because, as I mentioned, we want the next generation and everyone to understand this is an ocean planet. So kids come there. We have field trips. 4,000 kids came last year. We're probably going to double that this year. And each grade level is learning science and math with hands-on activities, including harvesting kelp and studying it under a microscope and learning that it was in the toothpaste that they brushed their teeth with that morning and that it has all kinds of other incredible benefits. They learn about underwater robotics and energy and all kinds of other great opportunities in the ocean to use it sustainably. And then we hope some of them will become the researchers that spin out new ideas, new intellectual property, new things you can do with that kelp, which we're finding all the time, by the way. And then some of them may want to take those ideas and turn them into businesses and the blue economy. And others may want to go into the workforce that's going to be very different than the workforce we have today. So let's go to the next slide. And what do we mean when we talk about the blue economy? So we're talking about regenerative aquaculture that puts more back into the ocean than it takes out. That can be aquaculture on land in recirculating aquaculture systems or in the ocean, growing, farming kelp, not just relying on what grows in the relatively shallow near coastal area that is a habitat for 800 animal and plant species, and we don't want to disturb that, but rather going a few miles offshore and floating ropes that you grow the kelp on. So you farm it like any other farmed product, but you then can extract food and fuel and pharmaceuticals and industrial products, amazing array of things from California kelp that grows as much as 2 feet a day. It's the most productive plant on the planet. So we do a lot with aquaculture. We also do a lot with wave tidal energy and other renewable energy from the ocean. We have 3 universities researching ocean carbon dioxide removal. You may have heard of direct air capture, where scientists are literally pulling some of our carbon pollution of the last century out of the atmosphere. It's very energy intensive and very expensive to do that, but it does work. Taking the same amount of carbon out of the ocean, which has absorbed about 1/3 of our carbon pollution over the decades. If you take it out of the ocean, it's much cheaper and much more efficient. And in one case, UCLA's version of this ocean carbon dioxide removal, the byproduct is green hydrogen. And that's another area that we spend a lot of time in, is helping decarbonize the ports, getting them to electrify with all of the container handling equipment that's on the terminals that takes the containers on and off the ships, on and off the trucks. Also, so that the ships, when they come in, they can turn off their engines and plug into the dock into electricity so they don't have to run their polluting engines when they're in port. And a lot of that's going to have to be with hydrogen because we just don't have enough electricity getting into ports. This is true all over the world, not just Los Angeles, to turn all of that into battery electric overnight. So we need hydrogen electric. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. And then things like underwater robotics, mapping, sensors, underwater construction techniques with 3D concrete printing that's going to be used for the offshore floating wind farms that are coming our way. Bob Ballard, who found the Titanic, he has a workshop at AltaSea. He builds his new robots and research technology and then sends it out to find more Titanics. Let's go to the next slide. And we think the blue economy is going to be a very big thing globally. We're talking about $1 trillion globally, but right here in Los Angeles, it employs a lot of people already, and it has the potential to really be the next Silicon Valley. And let's go to the next slide. And public engagement, this is very important. 8 times a year, we have open houses. We encourage all of you to come to sign up on our website, altasea.org. You'll get our newsletter and you'll hear about the next open house where we always have a speaker about the blue economy. And we have other organizations table, and you'd be welcome to table, and just so that everybody gets to know the various nonprofit organizations in the community, most associated with the blue economy, but even a Democratic club is obviously interested in preserving our oceans. So there's a direct nexus. We welcome you. And if you have a group that wants to come down for a particular tour, not on during one of the open house days, we're very happy to have you. Just get in touch with me and I'll put you in touch with the people that schedule those things. And our next slide. As I mentioned, education is really important, K through 12, and then right on into higher education. Let's go to the next slide. This is really important, as I mentioned, not only so that the next generation understands it, but so that whatever grade level the field trip is coming in, they're learning math and science hands-on. We also then train the teachers, because if the teachers don't realize what our field trip is teaching their kids, they don't know how that ties into the curriculum that they've got to teach that semester. So we teach the teachers to better understand the ocean and these technologies. Next slide. And then, of course, workforce development. As I mentioned, the workforce is going to be very different, using hydrogen in the maritime economy, with underwater robotics and construction techniques, with farming kelp offshore from a boat. This will take a very different workforce. So we work with 16 community colleges on workforce training programs, certificate programs, where a young person can go into a community college for 2 years, get their associate's degree, and at the same time take courses that lead to a certificate in aquaculture. That program is up and running today. Hydrogen in the maritime economy, that's with LA Harbor College. That one's about to launch in September. And then a third one is about to begin in underwater robotics. So training that next generation of workforce is very important to us as well. And then, of course, the economic development. That's what our 180,000 square foot of warehouses is really all about, is to give businesses the place to meet with researchers and improve those products, or come in and demonstrate them. You saw in that picture the floats that are on one of our piers that are turning wave energy into electricity with a company called EcoWave. They don't need help improving their product. It's already just around the Mediterranean, in Israel and other places. It's a commercial company, but they need help getting into the California market, to learning how to work with the utilities and the stakeholders and find the places like ports where you could put these floats on a breakwater, which is designed to absorb waves anyway, and then turn all of that kinetic energy into electricity. So that's the role that AltaSea plays, and gives them a home to be able to demonstrate these things. And then we try to use California's size to turn that into something even bigger. Let's go to the next slide. And here's an example, and this is again where you can all get involved as people with political interests. We sponsored 2 years ago Senate Bill 605 to incentivize wave and tidal energy the same way that we've incentivized solar. And when Governor Schwarzenegger and I created the Million Solar Roofs Initiative in 2006, our goal was that within 10 years, we'd have 1 million more rooftops in California with solar. We estimated that that would generate about 3 gigawatts of power, and that it would bring the installed cost down by 30 to 40%. We achieved the million roofs in 8 years. It generates 9 gigawatts of power. And to put that in perspective, we only have a grid in this state of 55 gigawatts. And it brought the installed cost down 70%. And that's not just here. Because of our market size, that benefit accrues to all kinds of other states and even other countries. So we're using California's market size and its progressive policies to kickstart these industries and make them viable for the whole world. That said, what about the whole world? So our mission is climate solutions from the ocean at scale now, because of the sense of urgency of the crisis we're facing. So how do we do that? Okay, California, as I said, is the world's 4th largest economy. We can do big things here and hope that it spreads. But we want to create AltaSea affiliates in all of these other countries so that we can share what we know and learn from them. For example, we have a coalition of 30 wave and tidal energy companies working on that Senate Bill 605 and introducing wave and energy technology into California. Only 4 are American. All the rest are from other parts of the world. So we're learning from everybody else, and then we're sharing what we know with them. So it's critical to be able to use this network to more quickly deploy these climate solutions into other countries. We got this slide changing thing going down now. We're very good. And some of the most promising technologies I mentioned before is hydrogen. We drive a hydrogen-powered car, hydrogen electric. People think it's battery or hydrogen is somehow burned or whatever. No, they're both electric cars. Imagine a Tesla. One is powered by a battery and the other is powered by a fuel cell with a tank of hydrogen. It's still the same electric motor in the front. And so what we know is that especially with heavy duty, these 18-wheel trucks that you see hauling all the cargo out of the port, the duty cycle of battery electric trucks is just not enough for the kinds of duty cycles that these trucks need. And then it takes a long time to recharge. You also lose as much as 25% of the cargo capacity by weight to the batteries. Whereas with hydrogen, it's a tank of gas instead of a liquid, and that gas is turned into electricity on board by a fuel cell that's much smaller than this podium. So, and in a car, it's about the size of a briefcase. So then you get the benefits of electricity, and it takes 5 minutes to refuel. So you're going to see a lot more hydrogen electric in the future, and particularly in the context of the ports. Next slide. So that's why when I was EPA secretary, Governor Schwarzenegger and I launched the hydrogen highway program to be able to break that chicken or the egg cycle. If you want vehicles powered by hydrogen, you need fueling, but the fueling stations need vehicles. So who was going to blink first? So we put everybody together, and we had about 200 stakeholders. And I have to admit, I was very naive, thinking if I just got the fuel providers and the technology providers together, that would be it. Well, what about the communities where these stations were going to be located? What about the fire marshal? What about the insurance companies? Okay, so I learned the hard way, and we got these people together to create this network. So that's why we have 100 fueling stations in California today, and now tens of thousands of hydrogen vehicles. Not as many as Teslas and other electrics, but they're coming on fast. Next. And then you might say, well, where's all that hydrogen going to come from? Because if we want it right now today, it comes from natural gas. You run steam through natural gas and you break out the hydrogen, but that means you're still reliant on a fossil fuel. So in California, there's laws incentivizing and mandating more green hydrogen, meaning you use renewable energy to electrolyze water and break the hydrogen out of water, H2O. Well, you might say, well, we live in a place where water is often scarce, and there's not enough renewable energy yet to completely transform our grid. Well, the sewage treatment plants here in Los Angeles County dump about 1 billion gallons a day of treated sewage water into the Pacific Ocean. And if you took the hydrogen out of that, it would power the entire United States transportation fleet. So that means that every municipality with a sewage treatment plant could go into the hydrogen business, sell it to the oil companies to put it into the gas stations, just like most of the hydrogen stations today are located in gasoline stations. You have 3 grades of gasoline and 1 grade of hydrogen. Same kind of pump, very familiar refueling infrastructure. And everybody would benefit. And you'd say, well, where's the energy going to come from? Well, today there's a thing called curtailment, which is where if you have too much solar or at night, too much wind energy being generated when there isn't a demand, it literally gets zapped into the ground, or the independent system operator pays other states to take it. So instead, what you could do is take that wasted renewable energy at the time of day that it's available, use it to electrolyze the sewage water that you would otherwise throw away, and you can turn 2 waste products into a valuable green fuel. Next slide. This is AltaSea. Last couple slides I want to show you. This is what we started with, these dilapidated buildings. And so we reskinned the whole thing with new corrugated siding. We put in modern electrical, plumbing, bathrooms. We built within the structure modern conference rooms that can be shared by the tenants, and labs and so forth. And then otherwise, it's an open platform where some tenants just need water tanks to grow kelp in. Others need labs with climate control and fume hoods and all those types of things. Our bank, Beneficial State Bank, came in with a containerized office and dropped it there and plugged it in and instant office. So we have everything, every type of construction there based on whatever is the need. Next slide. And here's just a couple more pictures of the finished renovation and Governor Schwarzenegger on the roof plugging in the solar. And I'll let you in on a dirty little secret. So we wanted him for the news conference to kick off the 2 megawatts of solar, which is enough to power 700 homes. We're a net exporter of solar from that roof. And because of the Million Solar Roofs initiative, he said, sure, I'll come. Well, we had to give the action heroes something to do, right? So I said to my electrician, is there a switch you could flip or something? They said, no, we've got these 2 huge plugs. And they showed me these 2 big plugs that would fit nicely in his big hands. And so we tested them. Sure, okay, this is great. So the morning of the event, I'm thinking, wait a minute, what if they just put the plugs up on the roof and there's nothing attached to them? So I raced up there and I found the plugs, and fortunately they had connected them to those big black cables, which they draped under the solar panels, connected to nothing. But it's Hollywood. It looked good, exactly. It looked good, and it made the point. Next slide. We have one more building to renovate that's 45,000 square feet. It's berth 57. That one we're going to start this year, and that one will be more labs and classrooms so that universities can teach kids, but also then spin out things from the laboratory, which then can come into the 180,000 square feet of maker space for various new technologies. And that's our team. And one more slide, I think, is our trustees, some of you who you may recognize. And the last slide is just how to contact us. And let me just leave you with this. I'm happy to answer questions if we have time. But, you know, you mentioned Dr. Martin Luther King, and your words were very stirring at this time. I'm always remembering a quote from him who said that anyone can be great because anyone can serve. You don't need a college degree. Your verb and your subject need not agree. You only need a heart full of grace. Well, knowing all of you took a Sunday afternoon to come here to try to save our democracy, to try to bring our communities together, to try to reinstate common sense and science to this country. You are all hearts full of grace. Thank you for what you're doing.
So I've always been a fan of the hydrogen economy.
The question.
I know it's a small molecule that is difficult to store efficiently. So
Right.
you made advancements in that recently?
Question is about, and I'm repeating it just for the recording. The question is about how small hydrogen is the smallest, lightest molecule known. So it's very hard to control. And if it's put through natural gas pipelines, which Southern California Gas and others are trying to do to blend some hydrogen with natural gas and over time even turn the power plants that are natural gas today to 100% renewable hydrogen. It can make the pipes more brittle, or some of the hydrogen can actually escape through cracks that otherwise natural gas couldn't get through. So that's why there are new pipelines being put in, or they're putting, because it's such a small molecule, whereas a gas pipeline coming into your home might, be this big, the hydrogen one would be this big, and it would get the same amount of energy through it. So in some cases where they're bringing geologic hydrogen from Arizona and other places, they're just putting a tiny pipe inside the natural gas pipe, or that's the plan in any event. And then, of course, all the other infrastructure has to be improved. Obviously, at the gas stations and so forth, you have redundant systems that capture any gas that leak, et cetera. But that's a very good point.
In terms of storing the hydrogen.
So storing the hydrogen on board a vehicle is done in a carbon fiber tank. It would look like an ordinary gasoline tank, except instead of being made of metal, it's a carbon fiber. So that way in an accident, it bounces, it's got some compression ability, but if it does break open, hydrogen is the lightest molecule known. So it dissipates like this rather than gasoline or even natural gas that would burn. So, again, you've got to treat anything with that much energy density seriously, but it's much safer actually than gasoline cars. Other questions? Yes, the question is, where are the hydrogen stations in California? The California Fuel Cell Partnership has a website. And so every time we went to the Torrance site the other night on the way back from Santa Monica and just pulled off the freeway there at Western and went to the station and refueled in 5 minutes and came home. So, but we checked first to make sure the station was operating and there wasn't too long of a line. So yes. Other questions in the back?
Structure at point forward for a generating location. Hydrogen is without having to rebuild our whole beautiful natural gas pipeline infrastructures.
Question is about hydrogen pyrolysis or other ways of producing it. So you can take waste materials and use the pyrolysis technology to turn that into hydrogen. That's certainly better than landfilling a lot of these things, and that can be zero emission. There are other sources of material. I think someday we're probably going to be mining our landfills to get materials out of them and use them in that way. And then there's not only the kinds of opportunities, as I mentioned, in just imagine the Scattergood power plant next to the Hyperion sewage treatment plant. If they were using curtailed renewables and wastewater, there's plenty of space there to build a hydrogen production facility, to your point, that you could build this at existing locations. So I think there's a lot of efficiencies to be gained. Other questions? Yeah. How is AltaSea funded? Thank you for asking, and your checkbooks, I hope, are at the ready. We're very fortunate that the $50 million in renovation, 1/3 came from the state. Thank you, taxpayers. 1/3 came from the port. Thank you, people that buy things on Amazon, because that's what pays the money into the port. And 1/3 from our major donors. Our programs, our education, our workforce training, our programs of what we do inside the building are funded by traditional donors. We have a very generous board of trustees and foundations, other nonprofits that share our mission. Other questions?
Do you know what's happening with that DDT dump between Catalina Island and San Pedro?
Infamous DDT wasteland, yeah, off White's Point. There's been a tremendous amount of work done on that to try to figure out how to mitigate it. As you probably know, white croaker and other fish absorb so much they eat the worms and other things that are in the sediments, which are full of DDT, and then that bioaccumulates, and then of course it can bioaccumulate if we eat the fish. And unfortunately, there's not an easy answer. There's been a number of solutions proposed, like capping it, but then it's there forever, like trying to dredge it, but then you're going to suspend a lot of the sediments that are full of it, at least for some period of time. And then bioremediation, there's new technology now where certain microbes could possibly be introduced into the sediments that would destroy it, but we don't know exactly what those microbes would do. So there's a lot of people that have spent decades on this problem. In the meantime, there's no easy answer, which comes back to the simple point. Once upon a time, we thought that you could throw things away, whether it was a landfill or the ocean, that you could throw things away. And we now learn there is no away. I mean, look at all the space debris that's a threat now to our satellites and to our space station. You can't even throw things away in space. So there is no away from, I think that's the lesson of DDT, is that these things are with us forever, and we've got to be smarter about how we use them and dispose of anything that is waste. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
So we have this starting here, but we don't have any by other ports in other cities, right?
Asking if there's other AltaSeas in other cities. There are not. There's a couple of blue tech hubs, one in Seattle. There's TMA Blue Tech down in San Diego that operates out of an office building. They had a great conference, which they do every year, of all the blue tech technologies and so on. But this is a very rare thing to have this much space for these technologies to come and be developed.
Down there, air operate. My brother put those cranes in, he's basically purchasing them. We'll see, this is how he's retired. And maybe go through the ports, those ports themselves as well. So now they have a model, optimal model, to try to situate them in Australia.
Right. Yeah, the point is that Maersk and some of these other big shipping companies have a footprint in these ports and an interest in the blue economy. We have talked to them, and wherever we go in the places where the countries have asked us to come, Indonesia and Brazil and Spain and other places, we talk to the people in the ports. So that's a very good idea. I don't know, how much time do we have for a couple more? Two more. All right, this gentleman.
I mean, I can put solar panels. On
Yep.
my house, or I don't have to rely on large.
That's right. The question is, can you generate hydrogen at home? And the answer is yes. In fact, Honda had a home generator they were going to bring to California. I was going to be user number one. And unfortunately, COVID slowed that down. And I'm not sure exactly what happened to it at the moment. But there you would have a small in-home generator. You could use your laundry wastewater and solar from your rooftop. That's right. Yep, that's exactly right. And so Honda has thought about that. And if they've got on one of their websites, the home of the future, and it's all powered by solar, it's using things like this, and then your car is right there with hydrogen. One more question. Who's the lucky sinner? Okay.
State, federal government that you're not getting now. Move your mission forward.
What do we need from the state or federal government to move our mission forward? I'd say the first thing is for them to understand the blue economy. We had a delegation of 30 assembly members from the state that were going to come on January 9th. They had to reschedule, so we're hoping to get them here. But in talking to their staff, they just have no idea. Everybody understands green. They get, okay, solar panels, electric cars, batteries, this and that. No, when you talk about the blue economy, it's blank, because the opportunities are so vast that I think once they really are educated to this, to the workforce opportunities, to the economic opportunities, to the opportunities to sequester carbon and tackle our climate change issues, magical things will happen. Obviously, no one of us can think the whole thing through. The federal government, I met with Energy Secretary Chris Wright early in his tenure here last year, and he's an oil and gas guy. So at least, unlike many of Trump's cabinet members, he actually knows the subject matter. And he said he was in favor of offshore wind. Of course, that was before his boss decided not to be in favor of it, because he said that that's cheaper than any other energy you can produce. And he said, I'm a math guy. If you show me, he said, the wave stuff probably isn't ready yet because it's not economically competitive. Okay, well, everything got subsidized in the beginning. But he said, offshore wind makes total sense. Onshore wind makes total sense. So, hopefully the federal government will find that some of these things are good for the economy and jobs at the federal level. And even though this administration doesn't seem open to new ideas, that will change. Let me leave you with my favorite author, William Shakespeare, something that he said. He said, nature's bequest gives nothing, but doth lend. And so when nature calls thee to be gone, what acceptable legacy canst thou leave? Well, I would say that all of you being here and the work that you're doing, the activism that you're about to undertake, that's a legacy that even William Shakespeare would be writing poems and plays about if he were alive today. Thank you all for giving me this time.
Thank you so much.